The forms of life we live, including the language games we play, are not set in permanent stone. There is no fixed number of ways of using language or thought, with new ways being added and others forgotten, just as we see in the history of mathematics and the sciences. Keep in mind, for Lewis Carroll there were no negative numbers because that would have resulted in impossible imaginary numbers, and now there are officially imaginary numbers in mathematics. We can use a picture of a boxer, Wittgenstein says, to do many different things, and this is how we can use words and language. So we could use the picture of the boxer to show someone how to stand as a boxer, how not to stand as a good or a bad example. We could always have a form of life as long as we have good and bad examples. As long as there's goods that we include and bads we exclude, which of course calls up all sorts of social questions, doesn't it? That can be a form of life. It just needs to have ways that more than one person can validate there's ins and outs. It's almost like Carl Schmitt says of the concept of the state. As long as there's goods and bads that people can point to, children can learn the game. Language and thought give us innumerable tools to use. Each tool can be used in innumerable ways. When we do use language in a drawer-like way, where there is just one thing for one particular thing, and there's not various ways it could be internetworked in the situation, as if there's a drawer for 5 apples, and you go to the store, you say, give me the 5 apples, and they go to the 5 apples drawer, and they pull out the 5 apples from the 5 apples drawer, rather than it being a variable number of apples, and it could be a type of apples, probably. Those sorts of generalities and reasoning problems are normal to life, so we don't just walk up to the store, push a button on a vending machine, and now we're done. Much works much like that, but notice that in life there's problems, we have mechanisms, we have behaviors, we have practices. Even if we used language in this drawer-like simple way, it could be interpreted in various ways. If we point to 2 apples and use the word zorp, this could mean apples, 2, red, round, on the table, ready to eat, or any number of things. The child learns through behavior to figure out what an apple is, and also notice, learns zorp means apple, not round or red. We already have the unstable, because apples could disappear, but sufficient form of life for meaning and the word and the practice, without the need of pages and pages of definition for what an apple is. There isn't actually a full-ordered, objective bedrock level of information going on, as much as there are simple things interwoven across varied situations that allow zorp or apple to be a word applied and used in various ways, which is the only way words can be used, even words like apple, because they can't just go in one practice of store apple buying. Let's just say language use in us and children would look very different if it were that way. We would look much more limited than we are. As Wittgenstein says, you could do philosophy entirely in jokes, and we could not joke at all if we did not have confusions like this. Just as children can learn chess by watching without ever hearing about rules and words, which is very much how chess and soccer are not really rule-based but practice-based and very regular activities. Children learn language by watching, listening, and then participating, not reading rule books, without ever hearing about the rules of grammar or the rules of when to apply a particular word. Thus, if a child is familiar with chess, they could learn what the queen piece is and what it does before learning to call it the queen. While we can use words in many different ways and invent new ways to use them, we typically use them in ways we share with others because language would not work as it does without familiar practices and routines. Humpty Dumpty, in The Looking Glass, the second of the Alice Adventures, says brilliant, and when I say that I mean that's a nice knockdown argument, and whenever I can make words mean whatever I want them to mean. Wittgenstein says, why is it that Humpty Dumpty, or we, cannot say boo boo ba boo and force it to mean right now, as I'm saying it, if it doesn't rain, I'll go out for a walk? Why can't we do that? Wittgenstein similarly says it would be very strange for zorp to mean if the 5:15 train from Detroit comes 10 minutes late, I'm going to have to take the train to Pittsburgh. If I walk to the door right now, and if I scream out ba-boo, ba-boo, I can't force it to mean to myself and others if it arises in a cultural practice with at least me and one other person. If there's 2 people, an expression can arise and become a special thing between 2 people. Why is it Leonardo da Vinci wrote backwards but didn't invent his own words? Wittgenstein does not argue that it is impossible for us to come up with our own words individually. But here's an interesting thing. Why don't we come up with our own private words for our own kinds of anger and feel them and then talk to ourselves about it? Why is it that we don't name types of red or anger in private ways for our own individual selves and never show them to anyone? It's interwoven with more than one person of a practice. When there's more than one participant, the language takes and interweaves as a social practice that an individual cannot say it. I say scream it. It doesn't matter how much you shut your eyes and try really hard or scream it really loud, does it, Alice? If you forget what it means, you can't interweave with others who reinforce the pattern. So it's not impossible to have private language. It would just be extremely impractical, and we do not see it happening. Alice says, oh, I'm going to send gifts to my feet. Wittgenstein says, why can't my right hand give my left hand money? It doesn't have the same effect. If I hand it to your left hand, that's two people. If I hand it to my left hand, that's not two people. Rather than search for the essential and universal form of all language, putting faith in a final authority that will settle all disputes in this or that area of our lives, we should investigate the interrelated variety of ways language and power work between participants.